Looking ahead, what does that unity rally today mean long term? We want to ask this with our CNN Global Affairs analyst Bobby Ghosh, who's also managing editor of Quartz, political commentator Buck Sexton. He's also a former CIA counterterrorism analyst. And joining me here in Paris, right next to me, Boston College professor of political science, Jonathan Laurence. He's author of The Emancipation of Europe's Muslims. Jonathan, with your knowledge of Europe's Muslim community, but also just the broader sense of the public feeling right now about this now, the simplest question I can ask you, does a rally like this matter?
Well, it matters in the short term a great amount because this is one of the largest rally on record in French history. That's saying something because the French have a real history of they basically invented the barricades back in 1848, the French Revolution, etc. So this is a monumental day. The question is, how long can the unity last? One very encouraging sign, which is really unprecedented in French rallies, is that the police were applauded every time that a column of cars would pass by. We're used to that after 9/11, but here they're not.
You're right. It's interesting. There was one moment there during the rally when some of the people in the crowd on the streets saw the snipers that were on the roof of a building, and they were cheering the snipers, who obviously want to sort of stay behind the scenes. They don't want to be visible, but here was a very public expression of that. Attorney General Eric Holder is in Paris now for security meetings. He was not at the rally. The most senior American presence was the U.S. ambassador to France. We're joined now by our panel to discuss this and the importance of this. CNN political commentator Buck Sexton. He's also a former counterterrorism analyst for the CIA. Shadi Hamid, he's fellow at the Brookings Institution's Center for Middle East Policy. And joining me here in Paris again, Boston College professor of political science, Jonathan Laurence. Jonathan, perhaps I could begin with you. That was a visible and a noticeable presence. You know this country well. Was that a mistake for the Obama administration?
I think that it takes so much time to prepare a presidential visit that it would be unrealistic to expect the president to turn up after just a few days. He made a point to go to the French embassy in person, which is really unprecedented. He wrote a long message in their condolences book. Secretary of State Kerry gave a long speech in French that I know that the French people appreciated very much. So while you're right that it would have been nice to have a more visible American presence, I think that there's no lack of messages of solidarity from us. And frankly, we're on the battlefield with them as well. So there can be no doubt about America and France standing together in this war.
Here to talk about this cultural divide in France, Shadi Hamid. He's fellow at Brookings Institution Center for Middle East Policy and an old friend. And joining me here in Paris, Boston College professor of political science, Jonathan Laurence. He is also the author of The Emancipation of Europe's Muslims. Jonathan, the Israeli Prime Minister, he came to France tonight. He made this comment: Jewish people are welcome to Israel, and you have the right to come to Jerusalem. Those who wish to go live in Israel will be welcome with open arms and a warm heart. I wonder, one, how many French citizens likely to answer that call, and do you think that's the right response to this kind of terrorism?
Well, I don't think so, because it is a bit of a concession to what the terrorists are seeking, which is to cleanse ethnically France of its Jews. One of the reasons why France has such a hard time, I think, recognizing this problem is because how much it's done historically for Jews. It was the first country to formally emancipate Jews in 1791. In 1870, when France was the governor of Algeria, it emancipated the Jews of Algeria, made them all French citizens. And then, of course, after the Second World War, France was instrumental in getting Israel its nuclear capabilities. So France feels that it has done a lot for the Jewish people, and it continues to try and do so. But 7,000 Jews left France this year. Part of that's economic reasons. It's about 1% of the French Jewish community, but if you compare that to Argentina, back in the times of its economic difficulties, around 4% of the Argentinian Jewish population moved to Israel in those days. So we have to weigh the different factors that are...
So you say 1% has left in the last year.
Yes, so approximately.
99, if you look at it on the good side, 99% have stayed.
We also don't know how many have returned from previous Aliyah.
So follow through. Jonathan Laurence, I want to ask you, because there was some evidence during the mid-2000s that as Al-Qaeda carried out deadlier and deadlier attacks in places such as Iraq, that it was losing some of its support, and Americans might not know this, but Al-Qaeda does have its supporters in that part of the world. It was losing some of that support. I mean, is there any evidence that with a particularly brutal attack like we saw at Charlie Hebdo, and the video images of that cop lying on the street asking for his life and being executed, any evidence that that saps the support that we have to acknowledge for extremist groups, for terrorist groups such as ISIS, AQAP, etc.
Well, this is unfortunately the result perhaps of the success in breaking the leadership structure of Al-Qaeda, which is that you have an increasing likelihood of lone wolf attacks, which are perhaps not directed by Al-Qaeda Central. Remember that the Qashi brothers are acting as an echo of al-Awlaki, whom the United States killed in a drone strike years ago. And so they don't need to have al-Zawahiri or bin Laden or al-Awlaki even alive and well and sending messages. They unfortunately are able to download a PDF from the internet. Inspire magazine, for example, which had listed the cartoonists at Charlie Hebdo as prime targets, and undertake this on their own. Now, clearly they got the material from somewhere, but the idea and the inspiration, unfortunately, does not require central organization.
Yeah, these magazines not only provide the target list, they also provide the recipes for the bombs, etc. Jonathan Laurence, Alra Damon, great to have you. We'll have more news on this, the rally today, and increasing terror threats right after this break.